On July 5th, Brian Wood visited the Freakopolis Geekery by video conference to talk to our comic book club about his series Briggs Land. Briggs Land, published by Dark Horse, tells the tale of an American secessionist family struggling to hold on to its ideals while dealing with threats from within and outside the compound. Taking place in upstate New York, not far from Freakopolis, our comic book club picked it as their first book, while Brian Wood, creator of Briggs Land, graciously accepted our invitation to answer some of the club's questions. Do the Briggs celebrate Independence Day?
I don't know. It's actually interesting because I got a similar kind of a question in an interview I did, where someone didn't understand why somebody on Briggs Land might display an American flag if they, you know, seem to. Their question is like they don't want to live in America. Why would they have this flag out? And one thing I learned when I did some research for this book is it's not America that they're objecting to, and it's not America that they don't want to live in. It's the control of the federal government, which they see as a separate thing from the country, right?
Sure.
So America's great, but who's running it isn't, you know? So there's, I'm sorry, got a spam call. Yeah, so 4th of July, I'm sure it's fine. There's nothing to really object to there. They just don't want to pay their taxes, I guess. And I admit that's a strange thing when you hear at first, but the more you think about it, the more I was able to make sense of it, and the more a lot of the research I was doing, everything kind of hinged around that, you know?
I guess they hold up a lot of the ideals of the Founding Fathers, but may object to modern day interpretations?
Yeah, I mean, they view the government as not accurately living up to those ideals, you know, and therefore invalid, or at the very least, not something they don't want to participate in.
Right.
But at worst, like completely illegitimate, you know?
What then was the inspiration? Did you have interactions like that, or perhaps upstate New York in general?
It was actually, I'll tell you something interesting about upstate in a second. But this was like a slow idea to come to me, and a lot of things writers do start off as something small that they sort of hold on to in the back of their head, and the subconscious works on it over time,
Right.
until it's ready, you know. So when I was doing DMZ, I did some nominal research into this culture, just for like an issue or two of DMZ, nothing much.
Yeah.
And granted, back then the context of this kind of research was different than it is now, you know. Like politics since the Tea Party have sort of cast all this kind of stuff into a different light, but also in a much more aggressive way, in the sense that it's on the headlines, you know, it's on the news and stuff. So I did a little bit then, thought it was interesting. Did some more when I was working on my Rebels book, my Revolutionary War, because I would try to do research on militias back then, and kept getting links to modern day ones, and I thought that was pretty interesting. How, like, if you're talking about a militia a couple hundred years ago, they're heroes. They're great. Everybody loves them. You know, that's why we have a free country now.
Sure.
And the same concept now is like the worst thing. You know, like, you know, I mean, well, depending on who you are, you know, but usually it's like the worst thing. You know, they're like, you know, terrible, like, lawbreakers. You know, and I thought that was an interesting, you know, little nugget. You know, and so initially I was going to do Briggs Land as a companion to Rebels, and have the family be the Abbott family from my Rebels book,
Gotcha.
just in the modern day. And the idea that this family has been there, and they were malicious back then, they're malicious now, but obviously the world's changed around them.
Yeah.
And they ended up not doing that, obviously, for boring reasons. And just trying to start off, trying to make it something different, something that stands on its own. And the thing about upstate is, I initially set Briggs Land in the American West, like in Washington State or something. Yeah, something like that. And it's like I did it without really thinking about it. And once I did think about it, I was like, I shouldn't do it just because it seems like the default location. Montana's pretty empty. It's pretty white. I felt like I might be missing an opportunity to have a richer location, So I grew up in Vermont, so I'm no stranger to upstate New York. Yeah. And I thought upstate New York had the rural land, and it had the proximity to urban centers. It was older in the sense there'd be like older infrastructure, older towns. And I just felt like it was a little richer. I had a lot more stuff to like draw on if I set it in a place like that, Like kind of, so it's sort of like it's upstate New York. We introduce a lot of like Rust Belty elements that might not actually be present in any given upstate New York town. They're a little bit more Ohio or something. That kind of like, working class, poor type communities.
Sure, and that really resonated with us in particular, being in upstate New York and seeing places in our area represented.
I had to really talk my editors into it though, because it was kind of like a last minute change. Like I had written the script set in Montana, and just before the artist was going to start, I was like, "Hey, I have an idea. How about if I rewrite all that stuff?" And they were like, like Dark Horse is a West Coast company, so they didn't really get. They don't. I think their concept of upstate New York might be like a postcard,
right?
Like a real superficial idea of it, and they couldn't really see it. But I knew it was the right thing.
So you were nearby in Vermont.
I was. I grew up outside of Burlington.
Then it's not all wine country.
Yes, yeah. We did a lot of hiking. My sister is a hiker, and she still hikes in like Adirondacks now. Sure. But I mean, we spend, I guess, most of our time in Vermont, but would often be in New York State. So.
Did you have personal experiences with people like those found in Briggs Land?
I didn't really. I mean, there was always like crazy people where I grew up, like crazy old coots. Yeah. That were like much more of like the back to the land hippie types, which I made sure was like represented. I mean, you don't see it so much in the comic, although it's a factor of the TV show pilot I'm working on, where I'm making sure alongside the sort of extremist types, there's also the old Earth Mama types and old crusty old guys with beards, so there's that, and I'm sure if there was anything else going on, I was not aware of it at the time.
So is this title a bit closer to home for you?
Yeah, it is. Sure. I mean, there's like I write a lot of books, but there's certain books I group together. Yeah. And I often talk about in interviews the progression of my political books, like with Channel Zero to DMZ to The Massive, and then this one. And I always try to like be working on a book in that line. I mean, it just exists in my head. It's not like a real line. Right. But I see this as like a natural progression of that kind of book I write. So for me, there's like I want to maintain a sort of consistency of execution. I don't know. This is difficult to like explain because it really only exists in my own head. but it's important to me in that I'm maintaining this thing that I've done throughout my career, this like sort of idea of a certain kind of story, a certain kind of comic. There's a lot of personal stuff in there related to Grace Briggs and my mother, who I felt was like, there's a line, and honestly, I get the TV show pilot I'm writing and the comic confused. So this may only be in the pilot script, but but I describe Grace as being someone who, up until now, has only ever been told there is one way to do things, broadly speaking, in her life. Like, this is what life is. This is what you do when you're living your life, you know?
Yeah.
And so now at this later age, I mean, she's 50 years old, she's suddenly being like, no, I don't want to do it like that. I think I can do it the way I want to do it now, you know? That was something I'm not sure. My mother, who died when I was younger, I'm not sure she ever had that realization that she didn't have to do things a certain way, which is like a little sad, but also something I think a lot of people go through life believing, you know?
Yeah.
Whether it's like imposed by like husbands or wives or their religion or their job or their, you know, whatever sort of culture or group or neighborhood or state they live in, you know, we all sort of get put down certain paths, you know, and Grace is making an effort to find a new one.
Yeah, that's
So it's personal in that respect, though I try not to let too much of that show up onto the page. Like, it's not about me, you know. So, but there's a little bit there that I tap into.
How did Briggs Land end up at Dark Horse?
Yeah, it was always gonna be a Dark Horse. Well, okay, so I'm gonna have to talk about the TV show because this is
Please do.
a big part of it. So I knew a guy who doesn't work at AMC anymore, but he did. AMC has wanted to make a DMZ TV show for like 7 years, and they can't because Warner Brothers, DC is owned by Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers, whenever they do anything, they want it to stay in the family, like other Warner owned.
The CW?
Yeah, or HBO. I mean, there's a lot of things that you might not know as like a Warner company. AMC is not that. I don't really understand how Preacher is on AMC, but whatever. So the point is, they've been trying and they've been failing. They've tried. I think they might even be trying again now. So anyway, so I maintained contact with AMC, thinking, you know, and over the years, I would just show them every single pitch for every single comic that I developed, on the crazy off chance that this was going to be something they liked, you know. And if I approach them early, then we can avoid all that weird publisher control, you know. And so for all these years, they look at everything. They're like, no. It was like failed every single time, until I showed them. It's actually interesting. I showed them a version of the Briggs Land pitch before the lead character was the wife. Like, the initial pitch, it was like the husband was the guy in control. And in that sense, it was like it really read like a straight mafia story. It was like a Tony Soprano kind of a guy, you know?
Sure.
And they saw, and they're like, we like this world, but this just isn't doing it for us. And I was like, all right. So, but then like a year later, I just said, I wonder what would happen if I switch it to the wife. And instantly, like, the pitch just was better. It was more interesting. It raised a lot of story ideas that would not exist otherwise, you know? Like, suddenly there's a lot more character, relationship, interest, and tension, and juiciness. So I brought it back to them, and they were like, okay, yeah, this is what we want. And I think also TV had changed over the years, you know? Because I remember early on, AMC would be like, our audience is men age 18 to 45. That's who watches AMC. but that was like back in 2006, you know. So obviously TV is, you know, a lot different now. The market's huge, you know, so there's a lot more room for the audience is broader. So I actually took it to AMC first, not really intending to, just in the sense that I would show this guy every pitch I did and assume nothing would ever come of it. So we had to do it a little backwards, and that I had to then take it to Dark Horse and be like, you know, AMC is already making a deal for this, but I still want to make the comic.
Yeah, gotcha.
So that they were fine with that. It was probably weirdest for me because I had to write both at the same time. Like I was literally writing the pilot as I was writing issues 1, 2, and 3 of the comic, which was really hard to keep it, so you know, just to keep it straight in my head and understand there are different rules for each. You know, and it got so weird to the point where I just stopped the writing of the TV show just to write a whole bunch of comics,
Gotcha.
just to like clear the decks, you know, to get past the events that were going to have to be put into the TV show.
Yep.
You know, I had to write those fully into the comics first. So that's basically that. So yeah, Dark Horse was always who I was going to bring it to.
Okay.
How closely did you work with Mac Chater on the book? I know you gave him reference photos.
Yeah, Matt lives in England, so there was like a lot of there's a lot of reference gathering for him. I'm sure I drive everybody crazy, but like I know exactly what this road is supposed to look like, this upstate New York road.
Yeah.
But trying to explain that to someone is like really hard. You know, like the roads where like on one side it's like a little hill, and the other side it goes up. You know?
Sure. Oh yeah. Sure. Oh, yeah.
You know, that's like really hard to like put into words, and also harder than you would think to find a picture of. So it was like a little weird at first, and Mac was a real trooper and put up with, I'm sure, what he was like. Why is this important? Why is the kind of guardrail important here? You know,
Yeah.
why do I have to get that orange posted no trespassing sign exactly right? You know,
Right.
I think he eventually got it, you know, and settled into it, and now it's like, you know, I have to do a lot less of that. You know, he sort of figured out what to look for and find his own images. He's looked at a couple of movies and stuff, which helps. But Mac's great, and I try to like stay out of the artist's way as much as I can beyond that kind of thing. Like all that kind of stuff has to go into the script. Like the scripts are full of links, you know, hyperlinks to reference images.
Yeah.
And I compile like a folder on Dropbox that has relevant stuff. But other than that, I try not to bug them too much.
Is there an end of the story mapped out?
There is an ending in mind. Like there's an event in mind.
Sure.
I don't know what number comic that'll end up at, but I know how it ultimately ends. Dark Horse kind of tends to, on everything they do, I guess all publishers do that, they contract you for X amount of issues at a time. So my first deal was for the first 12.
Okay.
And they've just extended that for like another 6. So I can say for sure right now there'll be 18 issues at a minimum. Obviously, I hope there's more. You know, it all depends on sales and how the trades do. And I know we're all waiting to hear, you know, if it's going to be greenlit for a show, which I hope I hear within weeks on that, which will obviously change everything. But yeah, I just started writing the third book. It's all plotted out. The third one deals with conspiracy theory and like fake newsy kind of stuff. And, you remember that Jade Helm thing in the news a couple years ago?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like basically that.
Oh, okay, when all the militaries moved to one area.
Yeah, and then everybody thought it was like, you know, they were going to start rounding everybody up and putting them into jails and Walmarts. Yeah, FEMA camps, exactly.
Cool,
So it's
cool.
like, it's not exactly that, but it's about that mentality, you know, that kind of paranoia.
Is Briggs Land designed in small arcs based on characters?
Yeah, it was. We had to we changed it up partway through. Like it was, we started off making this like a traditional monthly book in the sense that the numbers were going to keep going up. You know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You know, obviously the industry's changed, and now a lot of people like to do that thing where they restart with a number 1 every arc, which I get. You know, it's like I wish we didn't have to do it that way, because the reason why everybody does it that way is to get the orders. You know, to give the orders a little goose every time.
Yep.
So Dark Horse wanted to like switch over to that when I was like writing like what was like the 8th issue. So suddenly issue number 7 had to be a number 1.
Yeah.
So it was like a little weird, you know, we had to whatever. Now that I'm going into the 3rd block of issues, I can plan for it a little properly. So in the second trade, what will be the second trade, there's a couple of like one-shots that I did in order to sort of, you know, organize this right. So there's like a one-shot about Abby, who's the middle son's wife, who's like the outsider.
Yeah, we've seen a lot about Abby, but we don't really know who she is.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's true. I think people that don't try to write a comic don't really, it's hard for them to appreciate how small a container a comic is.
Yep,
Like you
yep.
really can't, I hate writing team books and group books because I don't know how to make everything fit, you know? I don't know how to give everybody screen time in like a 20-page story, you know? So, and of course I had launched this book with like a giant cast. Makes it hard. So, you know, people will drop out for like several issues at a time and they'll come back. I'm definitely planning it so everybody gets like their showcase arc.
We have questions about the show, like, how's it coming along?
No, I'll tell you, I'm pretty involved. I mean, the if there ever was a DMZ TV show, just to use that as an example where I am not in control of the rights. I own the copyright on DMZ. Me and Ricardo do.
Right.
But there's a perpetual option in place at Warner Brothers. And the culture of DC in respects to this means I'm not involved. Like if there was a DMZ TV show, like they would tell me about it, but that would be about it, you know?
Oh, man.
It's the way it is, you know. I made my peace with it a long time ago. But in the case of Briggs Land, there wasn't a publisher involved when I made the AMC deal, and Dark Horse wouldn't have done that, wouldn't have gotten bossy with it anyway. So I'm as involved as you can get. I mean, I'm writing the pilot. If it, like, assuming everything goes great and it becomes a show, I'd be like in the writer's room, possibly running the writer's room. I'd be a producer on it, so I'd be involved in like casting. I'd have to be on set, which I really hope is in upstate New York and not some fake upstate New York somewhere. I don't know. It's all about the tax credits. They'll probably film it in Kentucky or something, just for that reason. So yeah, so I'm as involved as you can get, which is great. But at this point, it's early. I mean, I handed in the pilot, the ball's in AMC's court now.
We'll be keeping an eye out. If you ever need any extras.
Yeah. All right. I'll take you guys up on it. You already have the beard.
Right.
We just gotta we gotta put all that military stuff on you, and
Right.
you'll be fine.
Where do you feel the actual location of Briggs Land is?
Where do I feel it is? I gotta bring up a map. You mean I assume that's what you mean on a map? I'll tell you what I can guess at, although I'm sure it is not accurate. I'm sure this would not have happened. But I saw this article that said talked about how much empty space New York State has,
Yeah.
and how it's a thing not too many people think of, is true. Of, they hear New York and they think of the city or whatever,
Right.
if they're not from here. So what I did is I looked at a map, and I knew it had the border on Canada, like that was the story point. So I was like, all right, where can I put it where there's nothing? Basically, like looking at a map, I'm looking at it right now. So, like there's a town called Ellenburg. There's Moon Pond State Forest. So I've been like, it's north of that. It's between that and the Canadian border. It's like there's no major towns anywhere here. Ellenburg is like the closest one. So it's like, I don't know the counties of New York, but it's like 3 counties over from the lake.
So between Plattsburgh and Mariah?
Plattsburgh is a little south. It's you got to go. It's right up there on the border. And I looked at a lot of maps, like survey maps you can get online, and there's like nothing. So it's like great, like that's the best thing I can do is set it there.
So then Jim Briggs is definitely in Comstock Prison.
I spent a lot of time, like when I did my DMZ book, we spent a lot of time being super accurate, and it's fun. It's not necessary, and people will always seek us out and tell us how we did it wrong. So I was like, so then I stopped. I think it would actually be Franklin County now that I'm looking at it. Like right in the middle of that uppermost part. So there was a guy that used to come to conventions for years, like years and years and years. He'd come up and say the same thing, and he'll be like, in DMZ number 4 or 5 or whatever, you drew the wrong side of the Holland Tunnel. You drew the New Jersey side on the New York side. And whatever, like Ricardo's in Italy, give him a break, Really, it's not a big a deal, but he spent years, like every convention, he would have to come up and it wasn't a question. He would just deliver that and then walk away.
And you were like, I know, you told me last time.
It's like, thanks, yeah, I know. Yeah, I got it.
Great. Anything you want to plug or mention?
No, just this is the first time I've done something like this, and it's awesome to have people in front of me that are actually reading the book. So I thank you for that, and I hope you keep reading. I don't know what else to plug. I'm doing Rebels, which I'm pretty passionate about. We're going to go back up to Vermont with the Green Mountain Boys in a couple of issues. I'm doing a lot of TV stuff. Doesn't mean I'm like turning my nose up at comics, but this Briggs Land thing really opened up a lot of doors. So right now I'm writing the pilot for another one of my books, which I shouldn't say. It's not DMZ, but I'm working on that, and that's an interesting. It's an interesting thing because I have to start over at the bottom, which I feel like a lot of us comic book writers are very spoiled when we've been doing it for like a long time, because everybody always accepts our pitches. Everything we write in the script ends up in the comic. There's no like level of suits that are telling us we have to change this or that like you would imagine in TV or film. Right, so in comics, you get really spoiled. And that's not what I'm going through now. I have to start over again as like a rookie. I have to basically like pitch and hustle and go to LA and try to talk everybody into everything. And the writing gets judged in a way that it hasn't been for decades, a couple of decades. So it's great, and I'm enjoying that process, and I hope I can sort of apply what I learned there back into future comic projects. That's the plan.
We're looking forward to what you do next, and thank you for joining the Freakopolis Geekery Comic Book Club.
Yeah, this was fun. Thank you. That's great.
Thanks so much.
All right, thanks. All right. Bye-bye.